Greetings and welcome. This is Psychic Medium Roberto, and I truly hope you are doing well. A trigger warning: the subject matter is of a mature nature and deals with true crime events. All cases are treated as alleged until proven in a court of law. Alright, so in today's episode, which is part 2 of the launch of the book True Crime and Numerology, and I'll put the link for the first one where we dealt with mainly the emotional markers, and I'll just redo the toxicity test between Gabby and her fiance. In fact, maybe let's just start there. So at the end of the first broadcast, I was talking about the compatibility test between Gabby and her fiance. So I'm just going to relook at that. And then we'll look at what we'll do in this episode is look at the red flags leading up to and including the crime scene, okay? In the previous episode, we didn't go too much into the crime scene. Now, with the compatibility tests, we note, and you would have heard, they are matched with the 1910 one. And in the case of the 1910 one, it's the person that's actually benefiting the most would be 1910 one, the fiance. The reason why the fiance is exploiting this or gaining more out of this than Gabby is because where her 1910 sits, it's the start of the day, right? So it's the day that she's born in, whereas where his is more, this is more foundational, more influence, let's say a solid number, where hers, in the case of Gabby, would be like, it would be a passing thing. It wouldn't be a big deal for her, let's say, by the time sunrise gets up, right? By the time sunrise, it wouldn't be a thing. She would be already moving on to, for example, the 22-4-13-4. Whereas he is fixed down, his outcome is a 1910 so therefore he's the benefactor, if you want to look at it that way. Because I do believe that their relationship is, and I don't believe I showed you this slide, theirs was definitely a transactional and karmic relationship. And we'll get into the karmic now. In fact, we can do it on this page. Now, Gabby has the 28-10-1 with a 1 outcome. So that's the year that she's born in. Now, when you have your number, whatever that number is, positioned which is the outcome of the year that you're born in, is very significant. Very, very significant. It talks about who you are, your lineage, from a lineage perspective, from a family perspective, from a heritage perspective, and even past life. So it is a key number. Okay. Now, we'll note the match with the outcome again with the fiance 10-1. Now, in this case, because now we have, for example, his life path is a 10-1-1. And let me just say here that the 1 in him, now there's good and bad on all numbers, right? But when you have a 1 as your power number, I beg your pardon, when you have a 1 as your life path number, that, like I was mentioning before about Gabby being singular-minded, that's one thing. But when your whole existence centers around yourself, which the fiance has that capacity, whether from minimum to maximum, everyone has a choice. But that is like me, myself, and I only. Okay. Whereas with Gabby, she has that 10-1, and I mentioned this in the first episode. 19-10-1. It is a singularity. There's different paths she gets there. The 19-10-1 is the idea building and sending it out. Yeah, gift to the gab, communication, groups, and singular. But it's to what degree do you want to take that? From minimum to maximum. But in the case where we have a 10-1 in the year, that is a serious foundational number. Now, that is what Gabby comes into this world with. That's what she came into this world with, is the 10-1. Right? We could even go as far as to say, if we had to look at the lineage backstory of Petitio, right? Was she maiden name Petitio? Huh? Her last name, I would say, just based on these numbers, and we're not going to go too deep in this reading because it's more about the book that I wanted to show, but I just want to demonstrate something here. That we got the 28, 2-8. So I would have it as a guess, pretty good guess. The 8, which also represents family, heritage, lineage, very prominent in the murders. That there would have been a splitting of communities way back when. If you had to go back on the family tree, at some point there would have been a separation of the main, but you will still get 2 of the same. Does that make sense? It's a common enough practice where even in politics, groups split and create another one. You know, it's that kind of scenario. They split for whatever reason. And of course, unfortunately, that 8 is not a very pleasant number. And then, depending on what time in history, will also determine the tone of settlement. Let's put it that way. So, and interestingly, while I was talking about that, we see the fiance, and in the book and in every reading, I'll never say his name, because these perpetrators don't need their pictures on the screen and spoken about, because that's been the issue, right? From a media point of view, are we glamorizing the killers instead of focusing on the people that should be, in this case, Gabby? So I never mention his name, ever. If I did, I must quickly cut it out. So, interestingly, he has a 26-8. Now, we have that 8 there as well. That also speaks about his lineage background. And they must, at some point in time, they must have crossed paths. We have a 6 here in his, which is about human contact, but it's also about revenge or violence. 6 is a very, like, let's say 6, if you had to compare 6 and an 8. 6 and an 8 in terms of a crime scene have the same intensity and impact, but the manner is different. So in other words, in a case of a 6, for example, it can be a gun or a knife. It can be bullets. But the choice of weapons, let's say, is extreme. It's not exactly getting hit with a wooden spoon. You spilled milk and now I'm going to come see you in my next life, so you owe me a liter of milk, right? Now, whereas with an 8, is the impact as a result of that weapon. It's the extreme nature that a human body can endure. from a biology point of view. I'm not going there now in this reading. I feel I'm getting a little pull towards, was he here for revenge or something? Was that the situation? I'm no expert on contracts and soul contracts and all that. I briefly researched, but I've never gone there in my current form. But I do have my own opinion, but I think at a later stage perhaps. So we definitely, I believe this was definitely a karmic relationship. So they both came into this life with the outcome that we know today. Sounds terrible. That's why I have issues with contracts and that. That's why. Because I'm still of the opinion we have choice. So there must be different, and I did, in part of my research, did hear about maybe we have like 4 exits and we can choose whatever exit we want based on our decisions, choices. So in my opinion, 2810-1 and the 26-8 both have the capacity to communicate 8, to engage in communicating amicably, because 6 is also about the human soul connection. So why was that option chosen the way it happened? Now, that is why I believe this was transactional and karmic, no? And not to answer my own question, but I want to answer my own question. So why did this happen? And there it is there, the 44. An outburst, lost control. Couldn't manage the process amicably through proper words, through a proper conversation. Like I mentioned, the 26-8 in him. Gabby has the 28-10-1. She can communicate. But I think his box of biscuits was missing a few there. And so we have a male explosion. Unfortunately. So let's go ahead and look at the red flags leading up to the event. And these are extracts from the book, so from page 50 onwards. And before we get into the details of the case, let's first look at the tone and energy of the month and year the crime took place in. The month is August and 8. In the positive aspect, 8 speaks to balance, weather, solar systems, health, biology, engineering, mechanics, locomotion, trains, war, communication, heritage, legacy, performance, art, dance, arts and culture and theatre. It is a physical number. Many sports people, for example, will have a combination of numbers but with a prominent 8. People with 8s are very present physically. Very present physically. It almost, you will probably get a sensation of they're almost like in your face or in your personal space, but they're not really. It's just that's the energy that an 8 or a person with dominant 8 has with them. It's the physicality of the number and the person in the case of a human. So yeah, in terms of energy, it is strong, forceful, and very influential. as we see in the current year 2024. And we're not halfway yet, right? So in the negative and in a crime situation, an 8 is extreme violence, particularly on the human body. It talks about imbalance, out of kilter, out of sync. When an 8 is nasty, or when an 8 turns nasty, it's nasty. You will see over time how often 8 is at a crime scene, particularly if it is very violent murder or crime on the body. Do you recall the murders of the mother and son? There were many 8s around at that scene, and I'm not going to go into the graphic detail here, so don't worry about it. But the 8s in the murders and here speaks about heritage, family, legacy ties. 8, we can all attest and say, when a machine is working, we're happy. But once that machine stops working properly, and it's still around, like I'm getting tapped on the shoulder here by the first gentleman that was taken out from Boeing. And I've got to get the name now. The case of John Bonnet. When an 8 goes wrong, it goes wrong. Okay? And when you're looking at a human body perspective, from a human being perspective, not very nice. It's now, and I mentioned this at some point in the book, maybe still coming up, but I'll just say it here. When there's 8s around a murder scene, the first responders have to deal with bad situations. That's all I'm going to say. So now that is the I believe the month that the crime took place in, right? So August the 8th. So a lot of energy around this time, coupled with the influences of the 5s. And yeah, I'm going to speak about the 5s here now. So the year that the crime took place in 2021 equals a 5. In the positive aspect, 5 speaks to the diplomat, politics, foreign exchange, import and export, international and attaches. It is a very influential number, right? You can imagine when it comes to politics, right? When it goes bad, right? In the negative aspect, a 5 includes lies, deception, fraud, corruption, bribery, and drugs. All that, and it always pertains to, in the main, what humans do. This is not natural. Lies, deception, fraud, corruption. That's not a natural occurrence. Only human beings can do those things. The influence of the 5 year on Gabby would be direct, as she is a life path 14-5. In Gabby's case, she does not have a direct or solid 5. In her case, the 5 is derived from the 1 + 4. And herein lies the issue for her in relation to the outcome as we know it today. And of course, it could have been different. The 1 and the 4, the 14-5, this brings about the arseholes, bad boyfriends, unwanted male attention, the bullies. In the negative, okay? Gabby, amongst other things, would deal with this regularly, including the issues she was experiencing with her own fiancé. So she would be getting it from all sides of society. For example, and I say it with respect, the police officers we saw on the side of the road, the way they were treating her, right? So she just got assaulted by her boyfriend or fiance. Then she thinks she's the one responsible for getting beaten herself, so it must be her fault. But then when she gets out the vehicle, she's surrounded by 3 large males trying to extort information from her, asking things like, well, what was the intention of striking him? Were you trying to kill him? To that effect. Were you trying to assault him or injure him? I mean, were they standing in front of an 8-foot woman with muscles bigger than their brains? So, red flags coupled with emotional markers set the tone leading up to the event. You can consider red flags and emotional markers as circumstantial evidence. That is your evidence gathering. Now, this is obviously from within the book this is from an investigative perspective, that your numbers are your circumstantial evidence. And the more cumulative evidence and numbers that you have, and direct hits, and we'll go deep on that later, is your case. Identifying these markers is the same as building a case. Like detectives, we still need to prove the case. So when we get a date of an event, and I think I mentioned it here, we can't go in with preconceived ideas. That's why I say the context, when you investigate, the context, keep it as simple as possible. Whatever I wrote as the context here. Gabby was murdered by her fiancé. Okay, Gabby was murdered by her fiancé. So now we're going to look for proof. Is it the case? Was she murdered? But we know in this case that she was. Because, of course, we know in the real it's played out. But here's it here, 18:9. Murdered. So, like detectives, we still need to prove the case. In each case, we will need confirmation. Personally, I seek out 3 confirmations. And that's the same with tarot cards. And I'm not sure about astrologers, but everyone has their confirmation tools. And one number means one thing, absolutely, without a doubt. But we need supporting evidence. We need to, it makes the case solid. And it confirms the theory, whatever the outcome is. And that's what I've just explained there. Gabby's profile fits the life she was living. And in fact, this is what I was trying to show you guys at the end of Ep 1, or the first part. Let me go there now quickly. It's safe to do so. So I had finger trouble during the live, and I tried to reconnect again. Have a look at this. This is at the beginning of the book, my dedications. Let's read all of them. I would like to dedicate this book in remembrance of those we have loved and lost to crime. I personally have an uncle that was murdered. At the time, he drove taxis. So in those days, you could have your private taxi, right? It's yours. It's like the Uber of today, right? Not meter. So you're working for a company, but it's yours. Anyway, a passenger gets in behind him and shoots him in the back of the head. And to date, I must actually see where that case actually went to, actually. I was a lot younger. I was still in my teens, I think. And I would like to dedicate this book to Psychic Vanessa. Psychic Vanessa was my mentor in my early days for 3 years. When all was dark, your light showed me the way. Love that. When all was dark, your light showed me the way. And then here's the part that I wanted to show you at the end of the part 1. I would like to dedicate this book in remembrance of Gabby, who was called to do great things in this life, 22-4. And her 22-4 sits in the day. And to inform us via video, audio, and journal, 13-4. Of her great adventures and create a community of followers, 23-5. Both locally and across the world, 14-5. That's her life path number, right? She wasn't just going to be local, ladies and gentlemen. We can say now, even after her passing, she is known around the world. But wouldn't it have been better that she could have enjoyed that privilege, that lifestyle, and enjoy the fruits that came with it? And I mentioned, these are Gabby's prime numbers. And these are all her main numbers in her profile. She was living her dream. And I mentioned this in the break. I did a profile of her date of birth, around about year, I believe. That even though this might have been her thing, maybe say for 2 or 3 years, it would have been a huge stepping stone to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. She was industrious. 22-4, industrious. But she was building. You have to build your profile, your name, your brand. And maybe she would have only done van life for 2 or 3 years. Because then the next thing would have started happening. Gabby was destined for big things. The 22-4 sits in her day. That means from sunrise to sunset, she is that 22-4. And the 1 and the 13-4. Those people don't sit still. They need to work. And not jobs, work. This is the terrible thing about crime, right? That people, we can argue this as well, but people don't get to fulfill that potential. In how many instances? 98%, 99%, 100%. Murder is never okay. And I mentioned in EP 1, and we'll possibly have a look at it now, but allegedly, I suspect the parents knew about her passing before he got back to Florida. All right, so let's focus now on the red flags and go through the red flags. So this is the week where we found Gabby famously on August the 12th in front of the body cam of the police officers that had pulled them over. Now, August the 11th, the 1910 one for me is problematic. Now, it's a bit presumptuous to say there's thoughts of murder, because in some cases 1910-1 is about thinking and doing a murder. Even thinking about a murder. 1910-1. Okay. And this is from page 54. So in this case, I don't believe murder was on the tables, although as mentioned before, August 14, that is a very scary day for me, right? Now, this could also be, there's thoughts of breaking up here. So it also alludes to or thinking of ending the relationship, 1910-1. So was Gabby, because she does have the 1910-1, he also has a 1910-1. So in the air, I believe there was already a threat of this relationship ending. And then we also have the 11-2, which means it can mean in the negative, people going their separate ways. So it's already, there's tension here. And we can attest to that because August the 12th, there's just violence going on. Gabby is getting slapped and hit. The fiancé is getting slapped and hit. The tension here is palpable. And when you combine 11-2, 19-10-1, what do you get? In the context of a relationship, shaky ground, uncertainty, instability, mixed thoughts, directionless. Now, if you are exhibiting those thoughts in your relationship, we're in trouble here. And I mentioned here with the 24/6 immediately after, that talks about family here. And I believe when he returns on August the 23rd, based on conversations he had with his family, allegedly, that the family pushed, in some way, are responsible because they pushed the agenda here. Your life is not going to amount to much living in a van. Mr. Tagalong. So already on August 11th, there's tremors, if you want to look at it that way. There's tremors in the relationship. And we note on August the 12th, that 16-7 in the red flag, now that I've marked it red. Repetitive behavior. And this is the issue. When the water becomes so nice and warm and cozy, by the time it gets too hot, it's too late. Because every so often the degree goes up. And it's not easy, but reach out to someone, reach out. And of course I've put it here in the book here as well, but with all this uncertainty and all this, we have that meltdown, the 22, the emotional outburst in public. It's now come to the foreground, it's not hidden within the van anymore. And it's not the next frame after the happy smiley pictures. So August 13 starts with the 13-4. And Gabby is a 13-4, and I'm sure at this stage she was thinking she's got to end this thing. And we know they went their separate ways for that evening. I don't know if it was for 2 or 3 evenings, but on this particular evening they were separated. So the next morning we got 13-4 in the air. That's like, this is the time to end it. Is in the air. And I'm sure Gabby was thinking about that. Here it is. Was this the time to escape the situation? An open door opportunity. It was in the air, 13-4. She woke up and life had changed. (21.3), this could, of course, we know they were separated, so this could allude to them being separated still for the next day or so, or the next day during the day. We spoke about the 26.8, War of Words, and he is a 26.8. So there's actually a good indication here that they might have seen each other here, but regardless, the energy is still higher, 26.8. And I mentioned August 14, this is a detrimental day here. This could so have been the day, August 14 could so have been the day, August the 28th. But on August the 14th, I mentioned here, you got all the red flags on one day. 14.5, bully coming. Going our separate ways, ending it. Ends up in a big argument. August 15, again, arguments here. But on August the 14th, you've got 14.5, 13.4, 27.9, 89. These are the numbers in a crime context only, in a murder case context only, where you don't want to see these numbers. That's why I believe this separation here prevented this from happening. But as we know, the 16.7 is always around. These are young people. They're not serial killers, but this speaks to serial behavior, repetitive behavior, going around in circles. Why weren't they listening to each other? Or who wasn't listening to who? So, August 15, also heavy day. We've spoken about the 14.5s before. The 19.10 one, same as, yeah, this, and we know they went their separate ways here again, 16.7. Going their separate ways. He goes back to Florida, she stays where they were. So if you look at, and we'll do the last week when we look at a build up to the event, but if you look at a summary, if you like, of the emotional and red markers from August 11 till August 28, there's activity pretty much every day, except for one day, August 21. Every day, so that's what's that, 3, 6, out of 18 days. Now think of it from your own personal perspective, if you like. 18 days, and only one is a nice day. Somewhat, because you'll have tinge from the day before, right? So we can say this whole 18-day period, huge emotional strain on young Gabby Petitio. And it was all coming her way. Because she was a life path 5. We were in a 5-year. The boyfriend or fiance, and let's go back here, and I don't believe I mentioned this, but I did mention, I believe, the year that Gabby was 22 years old was a 22-4, pings directly on hers there. Gabby was in sync with who she was. She was in sync. 23-5. 23-5. She was destined to build this big community. She was on the way. This was the plan. And 24-6, had she got there, that's where the world would be opened up for her. 24-6 is a big connection number. And you'll recall I said international. This is where the community becomes worldwide. And she's building a brand. But in case of the fiancé, he was 23-5. Doesn't ping anywhere on him. He was out of sync with her, first of all. That's the one issue as well. They were out of sync with each other. That's why they didn't hear each other. Or they weren't hearing each other, because had they heard each other, the issues would have been resolved. Whatever that resolution would have been. But they were not in sync with each other. He was in a 5, she was in a 4. She goes to a 5, he goes to a 6. They're out of sync. And the 23-5 that he was in pings on Gabby. And ironically on the community number as well. Why? Because that's what she was doing. But surely he should have been supportive. Turns out he's not supportive of it. When you have this situation, it's an opposition. So he's going against the grain of what Gabby's plan was, 22-4. It's in opposition. So while Gabby was trying to build her brand, build her life, build her career, build finances, there's lots of people living off YouTube, Twitch, and all them software things, right? And it's amazing. I think it's awesome. Says PsychicMediumRoberto on YouTube. But he was not following, well, he was definitely not going to follow her lead with his 1. He's the bigger boss in his mind. He's the bigger boss. So he was in opposition of her, what her plan was. So when you get to it's just on a very basic, simple way, and this is why I like to keep it like this. There's all the red blocks, all the orange numbers, red numbers. There's a lot going on here. This wasn't plain sailing. Then you add environment, like the van. You add in close quarters, baggage from previous arguments, because they, by all accounts, it would be fair to say their arguments weren't exactly tame. And you got all of that going on. So we are going to go to the crime scene now. So we know from August the 23rd going up to the 28th, we are mentioned in EP1. So round about here, I believe it was almost 3 o'clock. I'm just looking for that slide again. Never mind. But in this zone here is the last time Gabby is seen alive on CCTV footage. Now, whatever happened between, let's call it 3 p.m. for argument's sake, don't quote me on the exact time, but let's say for argument's sake. But by sunset, there's an issue. Or the build-up of the issue is so much, and I explained it here. This 44 here, this 40 with an outcome 4, is a male outburst, and the impact is on Gabby because the day ends with 13-4. So that male outburst is directed at Gabby. Here's her numbers here as well, 22-4. It happens first, right? The outburst happens. Then there's a highlight on Gabby. So the outburst is going towards her. So the bully is coming towards her. It is safe to say he did not kill her that evening, because we note the 28-10-1 the following day. Here it is here, 28-10-1. Which indicates communication between the two, a fight to be more specific, right? So there's a war, they're waking up and there's the issues continuing. This is when the bully goes too far, right? And I still believe that she was going to end this. She wanted to end this relationship. There's the 13-4 there as well. One of my bosses in the TV world where I came from at one point always said to me, you are 2 meters away from jail, or whatever the metric system is for in the US. Let's say you're always 3 feet away from jail, from prison, right? Because the minute you touch someone in a fit of anger, you're in trouble. So in a confined sardine can, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the car, with the vehicle, there's nothing wrong with it, but live in it for 40 days. And if that's not your idea of fun, it's going to be trouble. And that would actually probably, I've just been told by Spirit now, because I do mention that during this whole episode, while all this was going on in the real, it was like a film for me in spirit. And there was a moment that he considered handing himself in genuinely, because I did see an image of him in court at one point during all the chaos, right? And it was a firm decision, but it changed. And these images were changing. It was like watching a movie. And that could also attest to why he would never last in prison, in those confined spaces. So I don't know what his plan was in the end, or what his plan was initially with Gabby, but he probably didn't take her seriously. Now, let's have a look here. So we have that communication the next morning, right? 28-10-1. Now you can see just in this week alone, the emotional markers and the red flags. The kettle is boiling. The pot is boiling. So what happens during this big fight? The violence that pursues next. Because what happens? Because of the argument, and with the 5 present, all bullshit. It's bullshit. It's bullshit shit. If it was a mature couple, even the next day you'd realize it's all bullshit. You know what I mean? It's not even worth arguing and disrupting a relationship over something stupid, right? But we have the presence of the 8. Very aggressive, very violent. Which ends in a 369-18-9 murder. Here's the 36-9-89. So I believe during the course of the day, it would have been daylight in my opinion. And then once we get to sunset, this nasty number here, 41-5. That is unfortunately what humans do to human bodies post-mortem. Is it there? 41-5. Because if I'm not mistaken, and I didn't put this in the book, but just thinking about it now. So here's 16-7, if I'm quickly jumping here. The reflection summary day post the event, right? So the event ends here. In fact, it will probably end round about here. This is not the final render, so I'll just double check that. But because on August the 29th, right, which is the day after, he is spotted alone, yeah, in the zone here. He is spotted by 2 eyewitnesses, and he was, I believe in both cases, he was hitchhiking. So he's spotted alone here. And considering that would be unusual behavior, considering you're actually on a road trip with your fiancé. So some reports say there was asphyxiation, 16-7. So it is there. But it's what he does afterwards that changes everything. And I actually just remembering now, actually, when I was doing this case, or when I was writing the book, beg your pardon, the reason why he did what he did post-mortem, and I'm not going to be graphic. If you know, you know. If you want to go look, just be warned, it's not nice, right? But the reason why he did what he did, I believe I received a message was, while I was writing, was he didn't want people to find out what he did to her in her face. So let's say he punches her, beats her. There's the 40. Big violent. There's the caveman. Enter caveman. The barbarian. Some would even say the savage. Right? He beats her and strangles her in his fit of rage, right? Because yeah, hot tempers, 8, big filthy words, very violent, grotesque. But then he realizes what he's done. How do you say the reason why I did what I did after the fact was a mercy killing? Yeah, right. So what is he saying? On the one hand, he's saying, I'm sorry I half killed her. The only way I could finish her off is by doing what I did after the fact. Or is the truth, I did what I did after the fact because I didn't want you to see what I did to her face before I strangled her. And I believe what he did to her face before he strangled her is the reason why he did what he did after the fact, in my opinion. That's what I received while doing this case in the book. And I made this 33 a solid red. Now, of course, a viewer said, well, the outburst could have come from Gabby's friend. I mean, it's plausible in a sense that, but would she have known by this stage? Gabby may have, for example, texted and said, yeah, things aren't great, we just had another fight. But this, for me, it's too close to them. Because after this zone year, 1910-1, this is, I'm seeing, is the fiancé. Directly related to the fiancé. Which means, allegedly, possibly, it needs to be tested in a court of law. But interesting that a woman has an outburst within earshot of the boyfriend, the fiancé. So it's a really, I mean, when you look at it from an overview perspective, like you can see all the red and the orange, this was a terrible time for her. And how do young people deal with these situations on a mature level? When you still have young men as well, 23, behaving, I don't know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there. It might be a bit of a long read. I really appreciate the comments and support that I've been getting around the book. Thank you so much. I will be posting up more reviews a bit later. I'm just waiting for them to come in. But thank you so much for everyone that's bought the book. Please, if you consider it, think about it. It's such a beautiful system and can be used in your daily life. And of course, for the crime enthusiasts, can be used to solve crimes in the comfort and safety of your own home. Very powerful tool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Please leave your comments. I do engage with the comments. Stay safe, stay alert, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.